Um, so yeah, that kind of sets the scene for how I imagine things going. Um, it's kind of going to go in like, want to work towards like start with learning to see fungi, learning to just recognize them in the world around us. I'll kind of go into a little bit of my story after that of how they appeared in my life and how I've started to work with them. And then from there, I'd kind of like to just go into the world of like, how can we incorporate them? How does that look? Um, there's so many ways that that can go. So um, to really start this off, I really want to dedicate this and hold space for all of those who've taught me over the years. Kind of the mycological lineage is one of shared information. Fungi themselves are just kind of the ecosystem's communicators, and they just help spread information and share resources freely. And in a lot of ways, the mycological community has continued that lineage. And I wouldn't be able to be doing this work if it wasn't for all of those who have taught me, the fungi themselves who have graced me with so much abundance and teaching as well. Um, I also don't feel like I could be doing this work as well as I am without my partner, Emily, who's in the room with me right now. Um, my roommate, Shannon, as well, is really just like, that community, bringing the community together and healing each other to help heal the world around us has really been the driving force behind my work. Um, I'd also kind of like to just take a moment to recognize the space we're in as a culture right now, as a larger society, of why we're doing this over web series, Webshare. The world's going through a very intense period right now, period where we need healing more than ever. And yeah, I just want to hold space for all those who, although I in particular have been blessed with a lot of time off of work, I know that there's so many of us out there who are working harder than ever or are really struggling through all of this. And my heart goes out to you. And I do this work for you in a lot of ways to hope that we can help heal each other and hope that this work goes towards that. So with that, start talking about some fungi, because what this talk's all about. Right now, I'm surrounded by all of my little friends that, share this home with me. We've got all of our ferments here. This is our little fermentation shelf. These are all the books that have helped teach me through the years. Got my little Lapland reindeer fungi here. Some stuff that we're growing. We'll get into all of this later in detail, but just want to welcome them into the group too, because learning to see fungi, and here they are. So what are they? What are fungi? I don't necessarily want to get into the purely scientific, this is what they are, but I want to talk more about that. When I see another human, I don't think, oh, that's like a human, and I think of them on a scientific breakdown level of like that Cartesian, like, oh, body plus mind, soul, like that equals human. When I think fungi, I think, I walk down the street and I see a tree, and that tree is not just a tree. That tree has a plethora of different layers of life that call that tree home. The lichen that crawl all up the trunk and out on the branches. And on the branches, you see the wood ear mushrooms. In the ground, there's so much that we can't see immediately, but we feel and we know they're there. The mycorrhizal fungi that kind of keep everything ticking. I like to think of this quote by Paul Stamets. He calls them the grand molecular decomposers. Um, they're the recyclers of nutrients. They create basically the foundation on which we are able to sustain ourselves. They break down, there's fungi that are able to break down rocks and the mineral compositions. They usually partner with photosynthetic bacteria and create what are known as lichens that can spread on rocks and break that down, which eventually turns into soil. And a lot of scientists believe that the origins of life on Earth began through fungi, and this, or at least terrestrial land, terrestrial life on land, began through fungi and this association with each other, of which in turn creates soil and the forest and the food webs that we know of now. I like to think of them in a similar way of the grand decomposers. Is they're the connectors that bring all of this together. They create webs that spread communications throughout. They are medicine, not just for ourselves and our landscape, but for entire landscapes and ecosystems. They are able to break down chemicals that if humankind create, there's a chance that they're able to break down petrochemicals. We have the ability to work with them to remediate landscapes on a large scale. I like to think of them as close allies. They're everywhere. They're all around us all the time. They're inside of us. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but in a lot of ways, I think of myself as a vehicle for the fungi to be doing this work, less of them as a vehicle of myself, or less of them being my vehicle. I feel more like a vessel to be able to spread their larger work that's going on and help recognize the importance that they play in our everyday lives. So learning to see them, what fungi are in our daily lives. A lot of us probably eat bread. Bread is a symbiotic relationship between that wheat, the gluten, and yeast, which are fungi that create those bubbles. That is their breath that is being released and then encapsulated and creates sourdough. Like right now, we're making bagels in the kitchen. Those bagels wouldn't be possible without fungi. I know a lot of cultural conception of fungi revolves around mushrooms, the actual fruiting bodies. But that's just one stage of a very large life cycle that they're a part of. Most of their life happens under the surface, kind of invisible to our eyes. And there's so much more than that, which once my eyes opened to that, I was able to see a lot more kind of the web that is just reaching everywhere, all over, all the time. Someone painted the image in my head when I was young that when you're walking through a forest, you might not know the mushrooms are there, but they know you are, because every step you take, they're sending vibrational signals through the earth, letting all the creatures underground, all of the roots know that you're present. And to me, it was really humbling, but also really expanding, because nice, Gina. Bagel. Sorry, I just had to pause. We're making bagels too. I just needed to. I just saw the chat bar. Yeah, that's part of the larger vision of learning to see fungi. It's just recognizing how much they're there and what they're already doing for us. It's not a matter of bringing them into our lives and incorporating them. It's recognizing that they're already there. And we just can move on from there and learn to love them like that, which tends to be rather difficult. I kind of want to get into a little bit of, there's a word that's been going around. A lot of people have probably heard it the last few years, talking about mycophobia and the fear of fungi, the fear that comes along with it. A lot of people have this connotation that fungi, mushrooms in particular, they're poisonous. You can't get to know them unless a trained professional tells you it's edible. And while that is the case, it's a strange thing where there's actually a larger percentage of plants that can kill you than there is fungi. But fungi have this long-term connotation with death, with kind of the darker side of mysticism over the years. They've been associated with things that generally are considered heresy in the larger construct of culture. And I don't think it's right to disprove their association with death, because they are very fundamentally, intrinsically linked to death. But learning to morph our culture's understanding of death is where the beauty really resides, because we can't have life without death. And fungi are the facilitators of that process. They convert that being into thousands of other beings and are able to essentially create what's known as bioavailability, which is they turn rocks into minerals, which in turn another creature comes along and can convert those minerals into, say, spinach. And that spinach we then eat. So it's a long chain of bioavailability, and learning to recognize the whole cycle that is necessary. And another term that's been gaining a lot of traction lately has been mycophilia, which is the opposite of mycophobia. It's a love of mushrooms. And I can safely say I'm mycophilic. I love fungi. They bring me so much and so much happiness. And that's kind of the route that a lot of my work is moving towards, creating in others, but also just nurturing that love in myself and working with these fungi all around. I just wanted to give a brief little thing about that, and just gonna move through this seeing through fungi just a little bit faster. We've got some juicy stuff towards the end with working with fungi, and just some other stuff that's going on. So just kind of want to leave you with a little bit of like, where can you start with learning to see them? I mean, bread's a great way, but also I implore you to, when you go on your walks, if you're going on walks right now, when you're going in your backyard, when you're looking out your window, how can you learn to see them? Well, right now in particular in St. Louis, if you're in St. Louis, I live right by Tower Grove Park. It's right behind my house. One of the fungi that are really prevalent right now is the wood ear mushroom. And they tend to grow really high up in trees. But with all of this wind and everything that's been going on, check out the snags, the branches that have fallen on the ground, and you'll see they're covered in these green, beautiful, multicolored lichen, which you'll notice is like the little round, bluish, tealish colors. But then you'll see these little jelly blobs. They're like these black blobs. They're known as wood ear mushrooms because when they dry out, they look like little ears, but they're really delicious. I don't necessarily recommend eating fungi from within the city. Um, that's mostly due to toxicity of soil, air quality. But we'll also talk a little bit about that later too. So it's more just learning to get to know them. There's a lot of fungi. These are fruiting mushrooms. I'm speaking of in particular here, who I get to know specific trees that have fungi growing on them. I know in the park there's Ganoderma mushrooms, which it's the same family as reishis. So if you've been interested in reishi mushrooms at all, there's some family members living over in Tower Grove Park in the Shaw neighborhood. I know of a few others in Tower Grove East where they've been growing for years and they get these big polypore shapes. They kind of are going to look like this, but about this size, but with this complexion. So this one's a reishi. Don't actually have an idea on this one yet, but just to give you an idea of what to look out for. They'll be growing on trunks of trees. And you go visit them. I have a few trees that I go and visit. I went this morning to go visit a tree I know oysters grow on. I just think it's a beautiful relationship to start. I see someone's asked the key way to differentiate dangerous mushrooms. Hi, Bailey. That's my sister from London. Okay, key way to differentiate dangerous mushrooms. There is, but there isn't. It's one of those tricky things where there's a lot of lookalikes. That is where it kind of comes into play of like, I don't eat a mushroom or consume a mushroom unless I've either properly identified it myself and really trust in my abilities, or if I'm in an area that I'm not familiar with, I'll ask someone. We live in a beautiful age too. I don't particularly have social media, but I know that there's large groups on social media where you could almost get an instantaneous response on a lot of mushroom identification groups where you post a photo. People will let you know. But I personally would like to get to a better point where I can differentiate those dangerous mushrooms too. I know the lookalikes of the ones that I'm comfortable with, so I know not to touch those. Particular trees, that's interesting. So this reishi, I'll bring it up again. This reishi on the eastern coast and kind of eastern side of the Mississippi in the United States has a very particular relationship with the hemlock. And the hemlocks are in a massive decline right now due to I think it's a combination of a few things. There's an insect that's been taking them down, but also a bit of a fungal blight. But then the reishis come in. And in basically, I mean, I was walking through North Carolina in May a few years ago, and almost every other hemlock tree was covered in reishi mushrooms. So that's one in particular. Reishis love hemlocks in the US. Oaks tend to have oysters come fall, spring. There's mushrooms year round. They really like hardwoods for the most part, decaying hardwoods. So it's actually another thing is the more you learn to see fungi, the more you have to learn about trees, which I'm still 20 steps behind on that. I've been studying fungi for a long time, and only in the last year or two have I really given much consideration to figuring out the exact trees. So yeah, they do have particular trees that they like to grow on, and it's about learning those in your area too. I guess we could kind of go a little bit into like my story of how that started then, because you know, my childhood was in the inner city in Chicago. It's not the most fungi friendly environment. There's not a lot going on, a lot of concrete. But was lucky enough that like we had a wonderful yard that my dad was a landscaper and just did an incredible job. So I always felt like I was connected in a way to the soil and working with plants. And it wasn't until I joined Boy Scouts when I was about 13. And there was one of the older boys who he had just started getting really into mushroom identification. And I was just smitten. There was something that called to me about it. And then we went out to northern Wisconsin and I tried my first bite of a wild lobster mushroom. And up until this point, I'd only had white button mushrooms, the stuff you get at the grocery store. But for me, the moment that really sparked that moment of awe was getting to taste like a real wild mushroom that, yeah, I mean, I still get taken back to it. It's a really special moment. And for me, there was just no turning back after that. It was slow at first and then it keeps building and keeps building. And like I said in the beginning, I wouldn't be here without my teachers, and they've helped push this along. Seeing this curiosity and kept aiding and helping me grow towards where I'm at now. And where we're at now is right now we're working in our apartment, trying to grow medicinal mushrooms. We're working on growing them on a community scale to be able to provide what are known as mycomedicinals, which are essentially fungal medicines. So the different types of those would be reishis and cordyceps. There's one called the almond portobello, which is, we've yet to try it, but we're just starting to work on that. But it's supposedly a portobello mushroom that grows and tastes like almonds. There's also known to have many anti-cancer agents like enzymes and polysaccharides that could be really, really astounding news in the medical field. So we're working with a bunch of different types, along with lion's mane. And we're just hoping to grow that, be able to provide that on a more community level. We also do some work with, we're starting preliminary trials with some microremediative mushrooms and fungi, which I've got a really fun video to show. But there's one that can basically eats plastic and breaks it down into benign compounds that then when excreted are no longer the toxic, undigestible compounds that they once were, such as styrofoam. But we'll get to that. Kind of wanted to show just a few things that we've got. So these are cordyceps here. They're still growing. When they're fully grown, they'll fill the top of this jar with little Cheeto-looking, they look like Cheetos. They're really funny. But these are the fungi that will grow in the wild. They'll send out their spores, land on an insect, essentially take over that insect. The insect then crawls to the top branch, gets fully converted into a fungus, and then fruits out the top of its head to spread spores everywhere. Which just, it blows me away every time. It's incredible. So we're working on growing those. They're really incredible for energy production in our cells and recovery. So they're marketed a lot to athletes and people who are doing a lot of physical exertion, but I also feel that they play a large role in our recovery, not just on the physical side, but that emotional level that we have to cope with constantly. with being a part of this larger culture. Because it does take a toll on us, and fungi like this really can help build reserves of energy for us to really be able to thrive and prosper as individuals, and therefore as a community. This one's really special. We did this a couple days ago. So I brought this out so you could kind of see a little bit what's going on. So this is oats that we've inoculated with reishi mycelium. So you can see the difference here where this is the white up here. And these are all just regular oats that we've cooked and sterilized. And the mycelium is slowly eating all of this and eventually will, convert this to medicine through some other means, whether it be direct powders of the oats and the mycelium, or we will fruit some on sawdust. That I just want to give a shout out to Citizen Carpentry. If y'all don't know them, they're part of the solidarity economy. They provide me with sawdust and they're incredible. So thank you. So this will turn into this, which still blows me away to this day. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. And what we're hoping to grow into is I want to show a quick video. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully the audio works. But this is a fungus it's the one that eats plastic. And there's just a 1:30 video I'd like to share so that we can kind of just all be collectively blown away by this. So hopefully this works. Does everyone see it? I don't know.
This is like also the fastest growing mushroom that I've ever seen. It's so intense.
Serious.
Does everyone see this?
And it's in so this is a mixture of spora and the glowing E. coli. I have a bottle of sterile seawater, which we collected from the ocean and sterilized under the water by it. And so every morning I add 2 milliliters of this to my bioreactor so that I can slowly increase the salt concentration and eventually make the fungi able to survive in the ocean. By the time I'm done, these species will be able to survive in the ocean, and they will be able to absorb an oil spill, break it down, or collect plastics and break those down. And I started this with some regular broth. It's basically potato juice and honey. And as the fungi eat up the broth, I added in plastics so that when they run out of the potatoes to eat, all that's left in there is plastics. So they're forced to adjust their metabolism so that they're eating mostly plastics.
I hope everyone got to see that. Did everyone hear it?
Yeah.
Great. So that's the parts of working with fungi that really just keep me going and keep me searching for, I guess what drives me is regenerating and healing landscapes, both within ourselves, within our communities, but also on a whole, and learning to work with fungi as a way of doing that. Sorry, I got distracted for a second there. So I'll restart there. Basically, learning to rehabilitate, regenerate, and help heal both ourselves and the world that we live in, and collaborating with those who we share this world with. And in particular, fungi have shown themselves time and time again to be really close allies and friends in that struggle that we're facing every day. And I know I'm probably talking to the right crowd when I say something like that. I mean, we're faced with a lot of issues constantly, and the generations that are here now and those to come will be faced with a lot of really difficult decisions and difficult times that in a lot of ways we've had no say or control over. So that's a lot of what drives me, is healing ourselves and also healing the world around us, to hopefully create a more beautiful world that I think we all know is there. Taking a breath there to recognize that. I kind of want to get into how we can work with fungi, which is really the juice of what I hope this talk brings, because my intentions for doing a talk like this is not to promote the work I'm doing. It's to help create a larger network, because I'm just one of many people doing this work. And really, I want there to be more. I want to be working with others who want to see this come to life and recognize that it's already well and alive. We can just really, in profound ways, expand this network. So with that, working with fungi, I guess a primer for this section would be understanding fungi on a bioregional and place-based level. For me, is one of the crucial aspects. Fungi all over the world. And one of the first places to start is your own backyard or your kitchen. But learning the fungi that are there right now with you, the indigenous fungi of your land. I like to go through walks in the park, I mentioned that, and see who's already there. I mean, I grow certain mushrooms in my closet. Yeah, I know the stigma. I grow mushrooms in my closet or under my bed, but that's what we got right now. But one of my favorite things is to go see who's there. That's a really good way to start working with fungi, because if we know they're there, we build those relationships. We have a stronger draw to the place we live. We learn to really love the land we live on and connect deeper. And really just protect it just that little bit more, the little fragments that remain of wild, the wilderness, and of those beings who exist therein. So that's kind of the primer for starting to work with fungi. We just watched that video in terms of microremediation, and fungi play a large role in the larger bioremediation realm, which for those of us in St. Louis should be a very, sorry, I don't mean to shit on you, but it needs to be a very serious discussion that we have as a city. I see constant testing of soils and backyards that are filled with lead at a rate that is toxic to even touch. Children can't play in those yards. I mean, recognizing that we have a massive radioactive landfill north of the city in Bridgeton, I believe. These are very serious, very urgent calls for action, and fungi can help that. I know that I'm not on a place to lead anything like that, but I know that as a collective, if we're all starting to connect deeper with the land we're on, we won't allow that to happen again, and we can slowly chip away and work towards creating safe places and safe spaces for not just kids to play in, but for us to play in, because as adults, I think we also can learn to play just that little bit more. Jump in some trees and say hi to the wood ears before they snack down. But that was a little bit of a little tangential, but that's one of the big projects that I would really like to see come out of the larger picture of working with fungi. But we'll get there. But immediate ways for us to start seeing some benefits in our immediate lives. Everyone's got cardboard. It's everywhere. If you don't have some cardboard, I'm sure you'll find some in a recycling bin. But being able to soak that cardboard in some water, and taking what's known as the butt of the mushroom. I also just wanted to say that. But right here, there's this little stem butt right here. When it's alive, it'll have little white mycelial threads coming off of it. And you can place those stem butts on the cardboard and you'll watch it spread. And it creates this web-like structure, which is a really low-tech and really efficient way to introduce fungi into your backyard or possibly into your kitchen, because with that, I'm sure a lot of you are drinking coffee, possibly right now. Maybe you had some this morning, maybe you don't drink coffee at all, but there's always coffee waste. With that cardboard, you can bring in a bucket. You're gonna experience plenty of failure and contamination as you're starting to learn how this works, but trial and error is kind of the name of the game for just about everything in life. I failed a lot, especially with that one, learning how to grow mushrooms on coffee. A lot of people talk about how it's one of the easier ways to get into it. I actually found it to be one of the most difficult ways, but some people just take right to it. Some mushrooms take right to it, particularly oysters. So if you have connections with oyster mushrooms, taking that little stem bud on some cardboard, if you want to talk more in detail about how to do it in full detail, I'll be glad to have a further conversation, whether video chat, phone call, email, back and forth. I just want to open that space too, because I recognize that there's so much we could get into here, but there's also so much more we can talk about. So when it comes to details like that, reach out to me. I'll give anyone my email, phone number, whatever it is, so we can talk more, because I want you to grow oyster mushrooms in your kitchen too. One of my favorite ways to grow fungi is I like to build gardens a lot. I love building gardens. And there's a lot of wood chips available through the city that they give out for free. And there's one mushroom in particular, a fungi known as the garden giant. The King Stropharia is another name for it. I don't know the scientific name off the top of my head, but I don't know the scientific name of most of them. But that one's known as the soil builder as a common name. You put it in wood chips and lay it between your beds as little walkways. And then come next spring, after you inoculate it, you'll have these giant mushrooms, sometimes 6 inches, sometimes they'll be 2 feet tall, which is how they get their name, the garden giant. But they're known as the soil builders because they will turn those wood chips into the richest soil you've ever seen in a matter of 1 season. Which again, I just constantly have my mind just by seeing this happen. And that's my favorite way of really, on a small scale and on an immediate, like what can you do now scale, that is one of my favorite ways. All it takes is some wood chips, and I know that there's some local people who are already growing Stropharia mushrooms, and all you need is about a handful, and you just slowly build from there. And those mycelium networks will just spread and do most of the work for you. Talk a little bit more about growing process on coffee grounds. All right, we could do that. So coffee, when it's brewed, it goes through a process which is known as pasteurization, which is one of three ways that mushrooms are primarily grown in indoor settings, which is essentially heat treatment. So it kills off a lot of the competitive microbes and different bacteria that could be causing contamination, because you really want the coffee to only be myceliated by oyster mushrooms if you're growing oyster mushrooms on coffee, or another type of mushroom. You really only want it to be myceliated by that, so it can get to fruit without having to worry about fighting off other molds or bacterial growth. They are strong enough in a lot of ways, they will end up taking it over, but the spores and stuff from that you don't necessarily want in your kitchen. So through that pasteurization process, it kills off a lot of those. And one brief way to do it is take that cardboard that got inoculated with the stem bud, and then put that on top of some coffee that just got brewed. Make sure it's a little bit cool, like you don't want it to be really hot, and then cover it with a little bit more coffee, and then close the container you're growing that in. You want the container to be breathable. So buckets have been one of the main ways that people do this, but you kind of have to be drinking a lot of coffee to fill a big bucket. So finding any sort of reusable container to grow in that is breathable but doesn't let air completely in. You want to be able to close it. And then as you grow that up, when it finally fills up, as it's been inoculating slowly with your daily cup of coffee, when it reaches the top and you know that it's fully myceliated all the way through, you can pop the lid. You kind of want to make sure it's still staying moist too. You shouldn't have to add too much water to it, but once you pop the lid, it might lose a lot of humidity. So you don't really want it directly in a windowsill because it'll dry out. But then if all goes well, oyster mushrooms could just pop right out of the top all happy. And it's a really great way to kind of close that cycle and kind of close that loop of waste product, because not all of us are blessed to be able to compost directly in our backyards or something of the sort. So that's one way that one less thing is ending up in a landfill that could end up being food for us. And a lot of those nutrients that are present in coffee end up being taken up through the fungus and out through the fruiting body of the mushroom. So a lot that doesn't end up in the brewing process will end up in that fungus, which is just another way to really make sure you're getting the best out of your food. And if you're buying good quality food, you kind of want to make sure that you get all of it. At least that's how I feel. Yeah, hopefully that helps with growing mushrooms on coffee grounds. I'll be happy to send resources to images. So at the end of all this, I'll post my phone number and email into the group chat so that anyone who has further questions, I'll be happy to send resources. I'll go through all my books right here. Also, just for anyone who learns like that, I really just, like I said, the mycological community, we spread information. Everything is just given to everyone because we love sharing. And I got one more kind of closing thing I want to talk about before we maybe open this up, is kind of some conversations and further discussions if anyone heard anything that piques their interest. But I want to recognize we're doing this through the solidarity economy, and I'm really grateful, really grateful that I'm able to be presenting this to a group that does so much for so many in the city that I live in. And I don't know if I thanked you in the beginning, but I really want to extend that gratitude directly to the solidarity economy in Salina. and everyone else who's involved, because I love the work you're doing. And I kind of wanted to pose this image of fungi themselves as kind of nature's solidarity network. A lot of research has been coming out lately of how fungi play a pivotal role in the communication network and resource distribution in ecosystems. And they've been doing this long before science proved it. But recently we've heard of these networks that send electrons or divert nutrients specifically to trees that are struggling, or being able to create more resiliency within an ecosystem. And when I started thinking on that, I realized how similar it is to the solidarity networks that we build as humans, and how in a lot of ways we could be learning a lot from the fungi who have been doing this for millennia. I mean, so long. They've been helping aid others and boost others up and providing medicines both to the land and those who eat them. And I just kind of want us to sit and think on that, just, not necessarily right now, but just in general, of like, what can we learn from the fungi to help aid our solidarity amongst each other, and that process of sharing resources. It's very new in my head, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that one out there for all of us to chew on. Well, kind of feel like I could go on talking forever. This is what I love doing. I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't just want to keep rambling on. So at this point, I really want to just kind of open it up to everyone who's on the call right now and just see where we're at. And anyone who's got questions, comments, anyone want to add anything too, because I know there's a lot of people who know a lot about this too. So yeah, just
I have a question. So many new faces on this call. I'm wondering, like, are these folks that you're connected with in other ways? And also, like, just generally, what is the St. Louis, like, mycological community like? Is it, I know you're working with other people, and how do you all kind of communicate with each other and share resources, and just even getting a sense of, like, how many people or groups are there out there in St. Louis that do this and that are interested in this?
So within the city, I know of like a few individuals. I would really like to be able to be a part of kind of the things that have been going. I know that there's the Missouri Mycological Society, which they tend to be doing, I mean, everything's different right now because of the state of the world, but they've been doing events every year regularly for a long time. And I have yet to make it out to them, but there's a lot of small growers, a lot of commercial growers. Like I work at Confluence Kombucha right now, and we're able to source commercially grown mushrooms from at least 4 or 5 regularly available places. And I've got to talk to a few of those guys, and I would really like to be a part of the larger community. And if there isn't one that's really cohesive at the moment, that's something that I feel like we could really benefit from. And I would love to be a part of helping to build that. But yeah, I feel in a lot of ways like I might just be unaware of what's going on because I've been doing this in my bedroom at the moment. And things are kind of weird right now with trying to find others. So
yeah, awesome.
This is also a call out there to anyone who's doing this. Want to meet you.
On that note, can you share your email address or whatever contact info in the chat for folks to follow up?
Yeah, typing it in right now.
Yeah, and then did you have any other links or videos or resources that you wanted to send to people who RSVP'd?
Oh, just sent that only to my dad. Sorry about that, everyone. Here we go. My dad's already got those. All right. Yeah, I do have plenty of resources that I kind of wanted to share. I kind of forgot about towards the end. And I see that there's a few more questions too. So we'll work backwards. So we'll go. These two are my favorite books on the subject of food fermentation and fungi in the kitchen. So this is Sandor Katz's Art of Fermentation and Wild Fermentation. Those books are an excellent place to start with learning how to incorporate fungi into your kitchen and into kind of the food you eat and food as medicine, which is a perfect segue into what it sounds like next week's talk is going to be with food as medicine, because fungi play a pivotal role there too. For anyone who has kind of started doing any research at all into fungi, you've probably heard of Paul Stamets. He just had his documentary come out, Fantastic Fungi. And these are the books Mycelium Running and Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms. Mycelium Running is a fantastic book for anyone who it was one of the first books I got on the subject. Whereas Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms is particularly for those who are really looking into starting a small operation. This book is a fantastic book by Trad Cotter out of South Carolina. I particularly love this book because it's a lot of lower tech, more accessible ways of doing it. And he goes deep into micro-remediation, which we talked about with the breaking down of petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, and plastics. So he kind of gets into that in here, and it's just, he starts to touch on a lot of that, but he's doing really great work in that field. And then I wouldn't be where I'm at without this book right here. This is Radical Mycology by Peter McCoy. This collection of people who are doing this work are really shaping the future of what's possible and who can be, who this work is accessible to. They've really taken on what's known as I think he calls them the mycoligarchs, kind of a play on like oligarchs, because for so long, all of this was stuck in academia and stuck in the lab. And he's broken it down to make it accessible to people like myself and people like all of us who just, we want to work with fungi, we want to see fungi. And this book is just, goes through everything from the anthropology of it to how to do it in your closet, to how to do it on a large scale, to even just going into the historical references and context in which we've been living with fungi this whole time. I've got two more books. I'm a book learner, so I have a lot of these just lying around. This is a great book for anyone who just wants to hear a story about fungi and what's kind of going on in the world right now alongside of how we're living our lives. It's called The Mushroom at the End of the World, and it's a really interesting topic. So they're taking on the Matsutake trade in the Northwest and doing they're kind of studying alongside like an alternative to capitalism within a capitalist economy, and the historical reasons why the trade between Matsutakis and the Northwest has kind of thrived alongside of like the immigrant populations post wars, and how there's this whole underground network of people coinciding in a world with capitalism, but in a very non-capitalistic way, which this book is just Mushroom at the End of the World. It's really for those who just kind of want to like learn about what's known as ethnomycology, and that's the human relationships with fungi. And then I spoke briefly about bioregionalism. And this book is called Common Fields, An Environmental History of St. Louis. So everyone who is in St. Louis on this call, I recommend this book. I know it's available at libraries, but that's kind of irrelevant information at this time. But I think there's a PDF online of it too. But it's a really great description of the land that we live on and historically how things came about. There's not much about fungi in there, but it's about this place that we call home. So we've got a few questions here. I'll start at the beginning with Robert. Million plants to be a tough barrier to entry. How does that compare to the number of different fungi out there? There is a lot, and it changes season by season. Whereas a lot of plants, you can like they'll be there from spring to fall. You can get to know them throughout the seasons. Learning the fungi actually ends up being a really seasonal discovery process. Like I have a spot that I go to in the city where I know that there's these brown oysters that come up, but they only come up from late fall to early spring. But now that I know the tree, I'm learning how the tree will break down over time. So there's a lot of fungi, but learning how to see them at the right time is kind of the main difference between learning about plants and learning about fungi. And speaking of like cultivated urban areas, ones that we'll get to know a lot are coming up soon. And I think right now there's parasols coming up, which they're about, and that might not really be much of a reference to you on a screen. They're about 6 inches tall and have a big cap, kind of like a plate saucer, and will pop out of people's gardens right now. They're white. Yeah, they're really noticeable. There's a lot in Tower Grove East. So they'll be coming up soon. You'll get to know those. Yeah, there's a lot of fungi. It's daunting for me. So I say just start small, start with 1 or 2, get to know the spot. Gina wants to know about growing without coffee. I don't drink coffee either, so this has been, I actually personally don't grow on coffee. So I've been working a lot with sawdust, and there's certain fungi that will grow on, like lion's mane in particular, they will fruit on grains. I'm growing them on corn and rice, and they do this funny thing where like they'll just start fruiting. Most other fungi need other things, but corn will just do that. This cordyceps right here is this is just rice and corn that's been inoculated with the cordyceps mycelium. So it's a little bit more of a process than doing the corn. It's a little bit different, or sorry, the coffee. It's a little bit different, but same concept. Instead of a cardboard, I have a liquid culture, which you can order online. There's a lot of good companies that do that. One that I really recommend is a group called Mycosymbiotics, who they've kind of revolutionized cordyceps growing in this country, because they took a lot of stuff that was being done in Asia and brought it here and made it possible for us to do. So if you're interested in that, Mycosymbiotics is a great place for that. But if you have any more questions, Gina, there's a few. I would like to learn more about that too, so I can help share resources and we could talk more about that in detail. Because off the top of my head, I don't have anything right now, but I can prep something for you. Um, Bailey asks if it's not pronounced fungi. There's a lot of ways to pronounce it. I call it fungi, fungi. Some people call it fungi, fungi. Um, I don't think there's a right way to do anything really. So, like, call it what you want. I like saying fungi. Um, Lori wants to know about favorite recipes. When you're starting to learn fungi, one of my favorite ways to cook them is just by themselves with a little bit of oil, fat source, whether you use butter, olive oil, sunflower oil, and a little bit of salt, because then you get to know the fungus itself and how it tastes. But I have to say, for the little for the part of me that really likes extravagance, I like to deep fry chicken of the woods mushrooms and batter them, and then put them on like a hamburger bun, and basically make a like fried chicken sandwich. A little bit of mayonnaise, maybe a lot of bit of mayonnaise. I like mayonnaise. That's my favorite one. It's kind of yeah, it's something else, but it's really good. And those will be popping up this summer. So if you're out in the woods at all, if we can go out in the woods at all, they'll be coming up soon, probably June, July-ish. It depends. August, like late summer. There's some that pop up early, some that pop up late, but you can't really grow those ones on a tree. Well, you can. They grow on trees. I can't grow those ones in my closet, unfortunately, for all of us in the city. But otherwise, I would love to do that for us. Yeah, that's my favorite recipe. Uh, Anyone else got any questions? Anything else?
Actually, Les, I will send your email out to everyone who didn't grab it.
Nice.
Hi, Selena. I will send your email out to everyone who didn't grab it. Thank you so much for doing this. It's really interesting. I think I have a lot more questions, to be honest. So you will be hearing from me. But we should wrap this up. I want to let everyone know that next week we have a Food is Medicine with Sandy. And then the following week on Wednesday, we have a Tarot 101, the introduction to geomancy, how to divine during these times of trouble with Jason Lay, who is just a really, really amazing diviner. So that is all.
Yeah, so next Wednesdays is at 6 p.m. It's not at 11 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
And the link should stay the same. So as long as you have this link, you should be able to just log in, mark your calendar for next Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then the following Wednesday, the 29th, is going to be at 11 a.m. again. So
yeah. And if you RSVP like you did this time, then I'll still send out a reminder email with the link and everything, the same way I did this time. So, all right. Thank you, guys. Like I said, I will be sending out your email to everyone who RSVP'd. And so if anybody wants to grab it really quick before we close this out, go ahead if you didn't RSVP. And thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, thank you for being here.
Bye. Bye.